Hello, everyone. Thank you so very much for coming this afternoon. It's a beautiful sunny afternoon. Bonjour tout le monde. To be a little bit more bilingual in this context. I'm trying to stand in a position where everybody can but that might not be the ideal one because my back is to some of you, so apologies. But I don't want to get in the way of our lovely presenters here. It's a pleasure to welcome you on behalf of the African Studies Initiative to African Voices of Paris, Voix Africaines de Paris. And I apologize in advance for the state of my voice. It is rather weak. I've been getting over a bad cold for about 10 days now. So please bear with me. As I told Jen, it's not at its performative best. Let me say a couple of words first about the African Studies Initiative, since it is a bit of a mystery sometimes what it is and how it relates to other units on campus. It is a Title VI African Studies National Resource Center that's funded by the U.S. Department of Education at the University of Minnesota. Title VI is the same program that funds foreign language and area studies fellowships, which many of you may be familiar with, that support undergraduate and graduate instruction, particularly in less commonly taught languages. And this is a broader resource piece that funds everything from symposia that foster faculty intellectual activity on campus, to curricular development, to outreach and collaboration with other institutions in the Twin Cities and further outstate from the basically all the way K through 16, K through 14 being an emphasis of the outreach piece. And we've been engaged on all three of those fronts for the past 4 years, from 2014 to 2018. And we're entering a bit of a different phase now because we don't have National Resource Center funding as such for Africa in the next 4 years. We do have a continuation of our foreign language area studies, FLASK grants. So activities will be taking place under different auspices in the coming years. I've gotten ahead of myself. I don't think I have introduced myself. I'm Shannon Tyler-Dean. In my other life, I also teach in the Department of Cultural Studies and Comparative Literature across the way in Nicholson Hall. Without further ado, I first would like to thank the Department of French and Italian very, very much, and in particular, Juliette Gerbouillier, who could not be with us here today because of her obligations as chair, for her support and her very gracious and generous co-sponsorship of this event. And also I would like to thank Ruthie Nelson. Ruthie, I don't know if you're here.
No, she has to leave.
I hoped she would be. I haven't met her. I've just exchanged lovely emails with her. She's really expended tireless effort and exuded such positive energy in helping us organize this event, and I can't thank her enough. We can't thank her enough. With all that said, it is a pleasure, a real pleasure to welcome Professor Jen Bouchard from Normandale Community College and Joanna Kohler from Kohler Productions to speak with us today about a project that they have undertaken this year called African Voices of Paris, Voix Africaines de Paris. This project effectively involved a collaboration between Jen and Joanna, as they will discuss, that took them to Paris in March of 2018 to film, to interview and to film 4 individuals of African origin, and they will say more about this, but as you will see, 2 of those interviewed are actually French-born, but both, I think, just a generation removed from Guinea, so they're both Guinean origin. And then the other 2 interviewees, one is from Senegal and the other from Rwanda. So they span their backgrounds span various points on the African continent. They conducted interviews and filmed short documentary videos, as some of you may already have noticed, charting the lives and experiences of these 4 women and men in Paris. And they also created a companion curricular website with a lot of useful corollary resources to teach the politics and culture of race and migration in Paris today, if I speak broadly. Before I say a couple of words about Jen and Joanna, I'd like to turn the floor over to Deborah J. Deborah is the outreach coordinator for the African Studies Initiative, but also for the Institute for Global Studies more broadly, for international programs in the Institute for Global Studies, which is the administrative home. IGS is the administrative home of the ASI. And Deborah has worked very closely with Jen and with other educators in Normandale on this project, on this broader project over the last couple of years. So Deborah.
Thank you, Shannon. As Shannon said, we work under a federal Department of Education grant, and that absolute priority is outreach and engagement to other educators. And for that particular grant in 2014 to 2018, it was under the topic of African studies. So we started this project, I think, the pre-project of what you're going to hear today in 2014, 2015 with about 10 faculty members at Normandale who got together several times discussing about how they were going to integrate more African topics into their curriculum. A lot of the reason for this was also to make different connections with their student body. Very interesting conversations. Everybody was for it, and they realized that there was a real lack, I think, of those kind of that kind of content in the curriculum. There should be more. Jen and her colleague Catherine in the French department sort of focused on Senegalese poets, I believe, and ended up rewriting some of their curriculum with one of their classes, and then a year later gave a workshop for some of the K-12 teachers in the area about what some of the lessons and units they developed. So that's the kind of stuff that I do to work with just different levels. It's the teachers who do most of the work. I just sort of facilitate conversations and give resources and connect people together. Then Jen had this wonderful idea. She happened to ask if we had any additional funding. She asked at the exact right time because we had unspent money in the grant due to indirect costs of some sort or whatever. You know, you end up having this pile of money. And so she put together this project. And then it grew into this. So. It's anyway very delightful. If you're more curious about what I do, we have an international grant for the next 4 years at the Institute for Global Studies. I'll be doing a lot of outreach and engagement with different area educators. And if you want to pick up one of these flyers, you can kind of get an idea of some of the stuff that we do. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Deborah. This gives you a sense of what has actually led up to this project that we're discussing today. I will be brief. I will go now straight to short introductions of each of our two speakers, and I will then turn the floor over to the two of you to talk about the project directly. Jen Bouchard is a faculty member of the French and English departments at Normandale Community College. Her work on immigrant literature and art in France has appeared in the Journal of African Literature and Culture, the Journal of Pan-African Studies, Migrations and Identities, Liverpool University, which came out from Liverpool University Press, and in myriad anthologies and reference volumes. Joanna Kohler works with organizations to capture compelling stories, to move missions, data, and people toward a goal of storytelling for the common good. Kohler Productions is built on her award-winning filmmaking experience and is responsive to the demands for participatory facilitation and communications required to tell a story with the greatest impact. Her documentary film work spans topics of marginalization, equity, and universal experiences of hope, adversity, and transformation. Joanna has worked with the Twin Cities Youth Media Network and the St. Paul Neighborhood Network, and is a host and producer with the Emmy-nominated TV series Cineminnesota. Captured the name of that initiative correctly, interpreting the acronym there. So without further ado, I wish to thank you all again for coming today and to turn the floor over to Jen and Joanna.
Thank you so much for the warm welcome, and it's been a pleasure to work with the African Studies Initiative in several ways over the past 3 years. And we were talking, this is kind of an exciting moment because this officially culminates our grant project for the African Voices of Paris project, which I really hope also that this is the beginning of a dialogue with educators throughout the country. And so I was sharing right before the presentation started that this is our first official presentation of the project. The next one will be at the Perpich Center for the Arts. So we're presenting to a media studies program to their class, and then some French teachers there as well. We're organizing a screening at Normandale in January, and presenting it at the ACTFL conference in New Orleans next month. And then 99% sure that I'm presenting it in Pittsburgh at the American Association of Teachers of French conference as well. So this project will hopefully make the rounds and really open up a space for dialogue about the complexity of French identities, of African identities, and really hold space to kind of dig into some of the nuances there. So this project came out of a conversation that I had at a cafe table with two of the women who you'll learn more about in the films. Bilgisa Diallo is a journalist and an author. We met shortly after she published her novel Diasporama in 2006, and I was spending the summer in France, and I called her, and as a nervous grad student, I was like, can we meet at this cafe, and can I interview you about your book? And so we started discussing these identity issues in 2006. Our professional relationship kind of blossomed into a friendship. And when I was in Paris 2 summers ago, I was with her and her cousin Nenli Diallo, and they were talking about kind of this totalizing Republican ideal of French identity and French citizenship that doesn't allow for hyphenated identities like we have here in the States, right? And so this was far before, obviously, the World Cup win and the fact that this whole theme, this whole discussion kind of infiltrated the international consciousness, really. And so what they were talking about at that moment in time was that both of these women were born in France, as you mentioned, and that they very much considered themselves French. But at the same time, their African heritage is a huge part of their identity, and really figured heavily into their parents' identities, and they were looking for ways to valorize this and celebrate this without kind of playing into that far-right rhetoric in France of, if you are Black, you are not truly French, right? And so this led into conversations about race. And then, of course, this has become extremely relevant lately as the French voted to take race out of their constitution. So this kind of, out of this conversation that had lots of different intersections, we started to talk about how we could open up this conversation in the United States, specifically in French classrooms. And as a French teacher, and we have a lot of French teachers in this room, and teachers in other disciplines, it can be really challenging to find authentic, captivating content that really speaks to students' interests. And certainly our students at Normandale, and I would imagine it's a similar situation here, are very interested in projects that deal with identity, that deal with race and racism, power structures. And so these themes kind of helped form the framework for this project. So as we were kind of conceptualizing what this could look like, the creation of this material, Nenli and Bilgisa introduced me to 2 other individuals, Abdu and Lucy, who were willing to share their stories. So we thought, okay, how are we going to do this? Is it like, am I going to go and interview you? Are we going to take pictures and kind of create this this multimodal or like a multimodal text, about your stories? Is there a way that we could integrate video? So it was at that point in time that I reached out to my longtime friend, Joanna Kohler. Full disclosure, we've known each other since we were 16. We used to get into lots of trouble together.
We never got caught.
Yes, past curfew at Lake Calhoun. I don't know why we always went at Lake Calhoun, but
it was the Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Oh yeah, that's true. That was it. So through the wonders of social media, we've kept in touch over the years, and I followed Joanna's film career. And I thought that could be really powerful to bring in a talented visual storyteller like Joanna to help with this project and to really help structure it. So the actual, the plan for the project, the structure really came out of these conversations that we had together. And I'll let Joanna talk a little bit about kind of how she came into the project and how this project may have differed from how she typically works.
Thanks, Jen. I also want to say thanks to everybody for being here. And after I do this little spiel, I do want to go around and get a sense of who everybody is and what you hope to get out of it, like why you're here, so that we can make sure to try to address those. And I do want to say that while we were in Paris, some of the folks we were interviewing wanted to do screenings in Paris as well, because they were like, oh yeah, we need. So I'm just saying that, like, I also see this from my really outside perspective, as possibly being relevant in France as well. So, what was your question?
Oh, if you want to talk a little bit kind of about the project design and then how.
So I thought it was awesome when Jen got a hold of me and just was like, is this even a possibility? And I'm really used to, my filmmaking style is documentary style, and I'm very used to just trying to figure out community documentary style, which is a little bit, I mean, that's not technically a term, but it's a little bit different than sort of a more polished commercial ad agency type of documentary style. It usually means you have no money. And it means that there's really a heart. I shouldn't say that, like there's not a heart in the other stuff, but there's really a heart behind what the project is. And you're kind of thinking on your feet a lot, and you have to be really able to adjust to what the communities in front of you need, what the circumstances are. And so that was right up my alley. And I was like, Jen, I don't know any French. So, you know, we just had to talk through like what this could look like. And I was really having to rely on her heavily. This is her brainchild. Should understand the context that I was walking into and to really follow her lead about what I was doing. And that's, I mean, that's pretty standard too for documentary style filmmaking, is that you're often doing that. But we just got a chance to, like, you know, think through what this is. And the great thing is that, like, personally I line up really well with the kind of values that Jen has. And so it seemed really natural to, like, what she wanted to focus on, who she wanted to interview, and how she wanted to do it. And I just saw my job as, okay, I'm just going to bring a, you know, really open mind and do the technical piece. And, you know, support Jen in whatever she's doing, because, you know, like I said, she really was the driver behind this, and wanting to just make sure, like, as an advisor, like, this, you know, like, here's what to think about from a technical perspective so that we can capture this, here's what to ask folks for, and it's always a balance point of, like, not asking too much, and, you know, from people so that you get a good story visually. But it was a lot of fun, and I, you know, got to go to Paris. And after every interview, I was like, so what'd they say? So even here, I learned more. Like, I've seen the translation, but I learned more as she talks about it, because, like, you're kind of in the dark. But, you know, she did a lot of translating for me and just to figure it out, enough so that I could do the story part. And so, like, should we go around and get a sense of...
Yeah, let's do that, because the films themselves are contained in this resource site, and there are a lot of resources in here in a lot of directions. This is like a choose your own adventure presentation, okay? So there are a lot of directions that we can go with this database. So that is a great idea. If we just kind of know who's in the room and what your interests are, then after we screen each film, we can really hone in the discussion so that it's the most useful and yeah, applicable to your work. So yeah, good idea.
I mean, you are the bravest person. You're sitting in the front row.
Yes.
It wasn't a lot of choice. I'm Betsy Kerr. I'm on the faculty here in French. And I also work with our college and schools French program, where we have 22 teachers who teach our second year course, and diversity and identity are themes in that course. So it sounds like it could be an exciting addition to our curriculum.
Hi. My name is Genevieve Young. I'm a graduate student in the French department. I'm actually a medievalist. But I think, so a lot of I work on medieval political poetry in French and all that sort of time. but I'm really interested in sort of the foundations of nationalism and how medieval characters and tropes are then used to sort of prop up nationalist movements now and in the 19th century. But I don't know a lot about it. So I think I'm interested in learning more how to sort of present and look at race in a contemporary way, because I spend so much time thinking about it in the 11th and 12th centuries, and obviously these are very different things. So that's why
I'm John Normandale. I'm also a medievalist in the French, I think, contemporary. But for me, I thought this was really interesting because I'm teaching the 4th semester class right now, where the chapter we're on right now is national identity. And so this is really going to hopefully help me like interrogate this whatever national identity there is in France, and these kind of Republican ideals and things like that.
Hi, my name is Abraham Nante, also a third-year student in the French department, and my research is on migration. So the question of identity and all that is very important to me, particularly in undocumented migration and how people kind of think of their identity when they're migrating in that space. And also, as Ben said, we teach in the same level, so it's sort of important also to see how we might incorporate some of these things into what we teach.
Hi, my name is Fahana Hosh. I am also a graduate student in the French Italian department. My research is mainly on the Algerian War and the aftermath, and I'm using documentaries and archival footage to try and see how Algerian in France and in Algeria are trying to create their own identity today. So this might be helpful, but again, we are teaching several sections, so every time we have the same question about who is French and who is French.
I'm Chelsea Olson. I am a senior in my undergrad, and I'm just interested in French and French studies, so I just wanted to show up and learn more about the project.
I'm Deborah Jane, outreach coordinator.
I'm Carolyn Cade. I'm from the community and interested in this because we've lived in Paris for 1 to 3 months at a time, maybe 10 different times over the last 15 years in various areas, and have gotten to know a lot of people who were Algerian and learned what their lives are like, which is not good compared to their life in Algeria, except that they're in France instead. But they're Muslim people with dark skins, and so it's very difficult.
Yeah, we lived a lot in 18 in San Juan and Jules Joffrin, and so these places are real familiar to us. And as she said, the people we were closest to in Paris were Algerians who were going through their 8-year wait before they could do anything in the way of employment. And so that's the story on me.
I'm Shadi Paladin. Personally, in my intellectual work, I'm very interested in this, not just from an ASI perspective, because one of my areas of interest is in Francophone literatures, Francophone studies, both from a post-colonial perspective, but also from the standpoint of migration and diaspora studies, with an accent on Maghreb, Sub-Saharan African, some Caribbean literature as well, Francophone folds. And I also work in Arabic and in Anglophone literatures, and there are many points of intersection. So it's a fascinating project for me personally as well.
Should we slide over here?
Sure. My name is Julie Eddy, and I am a teacher. I teach French at Johnson High School in St. Paul. And I think these topics really resonate with my students. And I'm also just personally interested in talking about voice and identity and literature of immigration and migration.
I'm Lauren. I teach with Julie at Johnson on the east side of St. Paul. And I agree that the themes of immigration and power, identity are very key to our students. And there aren't the greatest of resources out there, and I think that you're allowing us a great chance to listen in on your conversations I'm excited to see them.
I'm Lauren. I am a lecturer and the coordinator of French 1002, 1003, and 1022 here. So I'm also interested in curricular applications of this work, and I agree that I think it's so important to bring in, I guess, voices that are not typically what our students think of as like Franco-French voices, so that part of the project really interested me.
I'm Kate Paisani. I work at the Center for Advanced Research on Language Acquisition, and I'm here because I really like Jen. But also, I have always dreamed of doing a course on Paris that brings in sort of multimedia, multimodal texts, and looking at Paris from different perspectives. And I'm also very interested in pedagogical approaches that bring in multimodality and multiliteracies.
I'm Frederick Pozin, and I co-host a radio show every week, which is Bonjour Minnesota, and I also happen to be from Paris, so it's a double whammy. And because we often look for people for interviews to talk about France, French, or from different communities. Last night we had someone, we had a band playing Cajun music, so we got to talk about the language too. So. Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to be open-minded. I grew up in Paris until I was 28. The African community is not one I'm very familiar with. And plus, because I've been gone for 18 years, it's kind of nice to see if it has evolved, if it's better, if it's different. I'm still in contact. I have my family over there, but I still see Paris through their eyes. And I think it's very nice to have a different perspective.
I love your radio show. It's like I'm starstruck.
Hi, I'm Lorenzo Fabbri. I'm a faculty in the Italian program in the French and Italian department. I work on politics and media. I did some indie media stuff when I was younger in Italy, and I'm here because as I was telling you already, I'm teaching this community media activism course in the spring, where we will have an Afro-Italian director, Fred Kuvornu, from Italy coming here, and we're gonna do a documentary about the East African, with the students of the class, we're gonna do a documentary on the East African immigration to the Twin Cities, and its relationship with the Italian colonialism in East Africa during the fascist regime. So I'm here to learn about this experience and this collaboration between faculty and someone from the media community, local media community. So thank you so much for being here.
My name is Michel Levine. I'm a senior in my undergrad. I study global studies and economics. I'm interested in urban policy, and I've read a bit and researched about kind of the suburbs of major French cities, particularly Paris, where there's high amounts of immigrant communities in the Benelux. So my interest brought me here, and I'm really excited to hear more about it.
My name is Kristen Flom. I'm a middle school French teacher, and I've just come off a sabbatical in which I traveled to Senegal and Martinique and in Guadeloupe. So my main goal is to try to bring in multiple voices, not just be teaching about France, but a little wider. But then I also want to bring it back and see what the immigrant experience is like.
Hi, I'm Jenny Funkhauser, and I teach also on the east side of St. Paul at Harding High School. So we had a meeting after school. I'm trying to plan a trip to Paris with my students for the first time, so it's a big deal. And we're going to be going next year, so I'm excited about that. I also lived 14 years growing up in Paris, and I think it's changed quite a bit. And I've been at your workshop before, so I'm excited about being here again and incorporating some of this into my day with my students.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to do that. It's helpful to know what wisdom is in the room, and then as we continue this discussion, I hope that we can keep in touch and I can learn from how you're using these resources in your classrooms as well and in your scholarship. So without further ado, let's move in and meet our first fantastic subject, film subject, who shared her experience so generously and deeply with us. Bilgisa Diallo This film focuses mostly on her entrepreneurship. Oh, thanks, Ben. Sorry, I thought you'd have to run. Okay, thank you.
You could give him the high chair, so.
I could.
Value.
This high chair that I've been using so much. This film focuses mostly on her entrepreneurship and the idea of hair and natural black hair and what that means in the French context. As I mentioned before, she's also a novelist and has been a journalist for 20 years.
Jen, are you gonna close caption?
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
En région parisienne. Donc je suis née en région parisienne il y a de nombreuses années. J'ai donc grandi ici. Alors décrire mon enfance, c'était une enfance assez banale dans le sens où je suis née dans une famille très aimante avec des parents avec une personnalité très forte. Donc j'ai grandi dans un contexte comme ça, très conscientisé au niveau politique. Et en même temps, mon père était comment dirais-je, un vrai Français. J'ai l'habitude de dire qu'il était 100% africain et 100% français, il n'y avait pas de contradiction avec ça. Alors, je m'appelle Bigissa Diallo. Aujourd'hui, je suis la propriétaire et la fondatrice d'une gamme de produits capillaires qui s'appelle Nappy Queen. Jusqu'à l'âge de 14 ans, j'avais des cheveux naturels et c'était très bien comme ça. Et puis à l'âge de 15 ans, parce que c'était à la mode, je me suis défrisé les cheveux, mais j'ai même pas le souvenir d'avoir pris cette décision. Il y a deux concepts en fait qui se chevauchent en France, qui est le concept de l'intégration et de l'assimilation. Dans ce pays, on a tendance à penser que les gens qui viennent doivent, alors pour l'assimilation, se transformer en français lambda, c'est-à-dire gommer tout signe d'altérité, tout signe de différenciation culturelle entre la France telle qu'on l'imagine à la base, c'est-à-dire de culture judéo-chrétienne, et les cultures d'origine. Et l'intégration, c'est tout simplement l'acceptation du modèle de la République, avec le fait de vivre ensemble dans un pays laïque, en toute harmonie et avec le respect des droits de tout le monde. On va dire qu'avec le temps, l'injonction d'intégration s'est fait de plus en plus forte, et en fait, au final, c'est une injonction d'assimilation à laquelle résistent les minorités visibles, dans le sens où elles ont le sentiment que tous les efforts ont été faits. Le cheveu naturel, en fait, afro, est un cheveu dont on ne s'est pas occupé pendant de nombreuses années. C'est-à-dire que jusqu'il y a encore, en France je parle, jusqu'il y a encore 6-7 ans, il n'y avait aucune marque qui permettait d'entretenir son cheveu dans son état naturel. Donc oui, c'est une question politique, puisque c'est une question qui rejoint le fait de les standards de beauté dominants. C'est-à-dire que jusqu'il y a encore très peu de temps, vous n'aviez pas de magazine en France qui montre une femme noire, à plus forte raison une femme noire avec des cheveux naturels. On n'est pas présent. Et donc il y a le questionnement de la représentation de toute cette population noire qui vit en France et qui ne voit personne qui lui ressemble, montré aux yeux du public comme quelqu'un comme un role model, comme on dit en anglais. Et donc moi j'ai eu l'idée de fonder cette marque en 2011, tout simplement parce qu'à ce moment-là j'ai décidé d'arrêter de me défriser les cheveux pour des raisons personnelles, entre guillemets, pas tout simplement identitaires, mais pour des raisons de consommation. Parce que j'étais consciente du fait que la pratique du défrisage était nocive et que quelque part je me disais qu'il n'était pas normal qu'on ait cette espèce d'obligation, qu'on se sente tout seul obligé de transformer la nature de ses cheveux pour avoir l'air acceptable dans la société. Et donc à partir du moment où j'ai fait ce cheminement-là, j'ai commencé à chercher les produits qui permettaient cet entretien au naturel, et je me suis donc très rapidement rendu compte qu'il n'existait que des marques américaines, ce qui était très bien, mais ce qui coûtait cher. Je me suis dit, mais en fait, il y a la place en France pour la création d'une gamme qui soit basée à base qui soit créée à base d'ingrédients naturels et qui permette un entretien simple et efficace du cheveu bouclé à crépus naturel. Donc pour moi, ça signifie plein de choses. Ça signifie tout simplement pouvoir être soi-même. Les jeunes qui naissent aujourd'hui vont ne plus demander la permission en fait, de faire ce qu'ils ont à faire et juste sans parler des droits qui sont les leurs, des outils qui sont les leurs, comment on fait pour travailler ensemble pour que ça avance, et comment on fait pour ne pas perdre le contact avec la majorité, avec qui on vit, avec qui sont nos amis, avec qui on fait des enfants parfois. Il faut réussir à travailler ensemble et à ne pas oublier qu'on doit vivre ensemble ici en fait.
Hey. Okay. Oh, good.
Je suis née.
Glad you liked it. The little boy who appears there at the end is her son, and my 7-year-old daughter has a huge crush on him. So I wanted to dig into the resource site a little bit to show you how I've organized this. So I framed the site in terms of multimodality, and I wanted to talk a little bit about why I made that decision, and kind of how it relates to integrating the videos into curricula at various levels for French language and culture, and then across disciplines too. And I don't know why, I think the internet's failing me here for a moment.
The wireless, the Wi-Fi can kind of go to sleep, so maybe going up there and making sure it's on Edu. Yeah.
Oh, what's the login for Edu?
Oh, hang on. Maybe not. Sorry, maybe you do have to be a guest.
Yeah, I can be a guest.
Unless you have an email address at Normandale that's connected to the Edu network.
It was working. Okay, there. I think we're on it. There we go. We're okay. So you are so lucky here at the U because you have one of the nation's experts on multiliteracies in foreign language classroom teaching. And so I had the privilege of working with Kate. She did a workshop with us, with our faculty at Normandale, and I have read her excellent book, and I am trying daily to integrate this framework into our curricula, and it can be challenging. When we're still in the process of moving from a very textbook-heavy curricula at Normandale to a multiliteracies framework. And so I do not claim to be an expert on multiliteracy, and certainly not on the framework, as I'm learning to apply it myself. But what I have been trying to do is just really dig into this idea of multimodality and empower my students to create multimodal text. So instead of doing a written assignment, to really look at all of these different elements and tools they can use to communicate the information they need to communicate. And so what I've included here in the resource site is and this will continue to evolve, so check back. So some online resources and some print resources that have been really helpful for me in kind of framing my own understanding of multimodal and multiliteracies pedagogy. And then some web-based tools for multimodal project creation. And I won't dig into all of these, I'll let you kind of do that at your leisure. But I've used all of these now with students either in my English classes or in my French classes for different types of projects. And so I can vouch for them for specific usage. And then I did create some example lessons pulling from the content that's in the films, keeping in mind this multiliteracies framework and then multimodal production. So again, kind of giving students the tools to create these multimodal texts and to communicate through a combination of image, sound. Sketch notes are really cool. I have them take sketch notes and then upload those to a Padlet. So just kind of giving you an idea of how I've played with some of these concepts in my French classes. And then some more general multimodal interdisciplinary type activities. So this is an activity that I used in conjunction with Godisa's film, and I use this in an online French culture and civ class that I teach in English. So of course I created the sample in English because not all of the students in that class speak French. But I wanted to look at this idea of hair care products for Black women in the US and in France. So I did kind of a visual analysis, so looking at author, genre, audience, purpose, content. And we looked at different types of advertisements. So this for another French hair care company. Of course I did Nappy Clean. And we kind of talked offline, it didn't really make it into the video, but this word nappy and the connotations that it has here in the US versus the connotations it has in France. And then doing just kind of a comparative analysis between how natural hair care products are branded in the US and France. Of course, this is something that you could do in a French class as well. I just happened to use it in an English culture class. So then I have a different page where I have thematic resources. So some general resources at the top, and depending on how much time we have at the end, we can dig into some of these. Looking at constructions of citizenship and identity, and how race plays into that. And I've been pulling a lot, I'm organizing a lesson, I'm developing a lesson on the World Cup World Cup soccer win. And so I've been pulling a lot of resources on that lately, so it's gonna skew a little heavily toward that topic. And then for each film, I've started to pull some specific resources that, that relate to the person who is being interviewed. So for Bilgisa Diallo, it is of course, her website, her company, Nappy Queen. Which can be used for that image analysis, looking at messaging, advertisement, all of that. And then Rokhaya Diallo, who you're probably familiar with, is a very controversial figure in France at the moment. She's an outspoken racial justice advocate, and so in a country that doesn't recognize race, that just removed race from the Constitution, she's occupying a very controversial space in terms of social discourse in France right now. And her most recent project was this book that focuses on black hair and what that means in French society. And so I'll leave these out and folks can take a look at the end. So I've included some information about her too. No direct relation to Bilgisa Diallo, but they are friends and they work together. They're just not like cousins or anything. So let me back out of that. So the thematic resources could be useful just for your own background knowledge before showing the films, before going into a classroom. But they can also provide a starting place for research projects if you wanted to assign something like that to students. You know, find 4 black hair care products from the US, find 4 advertisements to bring into class kind of as a preparation for viewing the film. Any questions or comments on the Bilgisa film?
How many African American students are there at Normandale?
Oh, at Normandale?
Yeah.
I don't know off the top of my head. I'm the worst with demographic data.
Yeah. But I mean, I assume it's typical of the southern suburbs.
Yeah, we have a large black student population. So yeah, so from the African American community, certainly a large population from the Somali American community. So yeah. Okay, let's move into Nimli's story.
What was the name of the author of the Afro book?
Oh yeah, Rokhaya Diallo.
Thank you.
Yeah, there's a lot of great content on her online because she, like I said, she's very outspoken, and so lots of great interviews and articles. She's a journalist, so lots of great articles she's written on race and identity. Closed captions.
L'association des professionnels de la mode et du design du quartier de la Goutte d'Or a donc réuni des entreprises qui sont essentiellement dans le secteur mode, textile, design, Il y a dans cette association une volonté de fédérer des designers autour d'un projet commun d'utilisation.
I should have asked for a login. Sorry.
Ce sont des outils, des savoir-faire dans le but de répondre à des commandes. Je m'appelle Nénélie Diallo, j'habite à Paris, je suis d'origine guinéenne. L'association est née d'un projet en fait, de la ville de Paris parce qu'ils avaient constaté que les deux activités principales du quartier étaient l'alimentation et la mode, le textile. Donc ils ont décidé de faire émerger en fait les métiers de ce quartier, les entreprises, parce qu'il y avait beaucoup d'informels en fait, il y avait beaucoup d'entreprises qui n'étaient pas forcément déclarées. Donc on nous a demandé, nous les membres fondateurs de l'association, de parcourir le quartier et de les impliquer dans le projet. Au départ, il devait y avoir peut-être 11-12 membres, aujourd'hui on est à une quarantaine de membres. Moi, mon objectif actuellement, c'est vraiment ça. J'aime les gens, je fais de la mise en réseau. Si quelqu'un a envie une idée de création d'entreprise, je vais aller le mettre en rapport avec la bonne personne. Alors, moi, je suis la fille d'un médecin Peul. Mon père est arrivé dans les années 60 à Paris. Il a fait partie, je dirais, de ces médecins, les élites africaines qui sont arrivées dans les années 60. Il y avait un problème, je dirais, politique du dictateur de l'époque, Sékou Touré, qui a malheureusement conduit beaucoup de dignitaires Peul de quitter le pays. Les Peul, je dirais, se caractérisent par un attachement fort à leur culture et à une certaine autonomie. Il faut savoir qu'on est des nomades. Et ma mère, par exemple, s'attachait à ce qu'on reste dans la culture. C'est-à-dire, par exemple, elle me faisait porter, comme les boucles d'oreilles que j'ai aujourd'hui, elle me faisait porter des bijoux typiquement Peul. Elle me coiffait vraiment comme des petites filles Peul. Je pense que je suis française parce qu'aujourd'hui, un Français, entre guillemets de souche, n'a pas grand-chose à m'apprendre. Je connais la culture française. Je suis née en France, je suis née à Paris, en plus. Et j'ai grandi, je dirais, jusqu'à mes 13 ans avec beaucoup de Français. Je vais parler à mes fils qui sont d'origine aussi Peul, mais sénégalais. Je vais parler à mes fils en Peul. Voilà. Et j'ai travaillé dans l'association pour un projet lors de la fête des vendanges pour élaborer la Marianne, la vision de la Marianne de l'association. Et je l'ai d'ailleurs représenté à cette occasion. J'ai porté la robe qui avait été fabriquée par la fabrique de la Goutte d'Or. Cette robe, en fait, était un message pour montrer que le quartier de la Goutte d'Or est un quartier de diversité, un quartier dans lequel il y a différents acteurs et qui, évidemment, entend aussi s'imposer dans Paris comme un quartier mode. Je trouve ça un peu dommage parfois d'avoir à prouver qu'on est français. Mais être français, c'est vraiment pour moi accepter déjà les lois de la France et surtout apporter sa culture, mais ne pas imposer que sa culture. Je pense qu'il faut être sur le même pied d'égalité. Voilà. Vraiment, pour moi, l'objectif est d'aider les personnes de mon origine, les Africains en général, à aller jusqu'au bout de leurs projets professionnels, culturels, etc. Moi, j'ai envie qu'on ait une vision internationale, comme on voit partout, mais surtout, j'ai envie qu'on continue à travailler pour une maison prestigieuse. Je sais que ça peut se faire. On a de plus en plus de moyens financiers, on arrive à réfléchir sur de bons projets. Je sais que ça va se faire. Mais même si je suis française, je reste profondément africaine.
So I think it would be possible to teach an entire course just on that image of her as La Marianne. And it's actually through that image that I met Neneli. Her cousin Bilgisa shared it on Facebook, and I was like, oh my gosh, I need to meet this woman and I need to find out more about this initiative. So perhaps, not surprisingly, one of the sample lessons I have here is about La Marianne. And La Marianne is a symbol of France, and I think, you know, most of us as French teachers teach about that, and really kind of digging into that and problematizing that image a little bit, using the image that you saw in the film, but wait, there's more. There are other images from that same initiative, this organization, Les Gouttes d'Or. So there are other designers who are part of that collective who created their interpretation of La Marianne as well, bringing in these various cultural components. So as you can imagine, this was a controversial project, which means it got a lot of attention. And eventually, La Mairie de Paris asked them if they wanted to do a show. So there was a gallery show of these photos. And then they were also on display in the Barbès metro station for a period of time as well. So the lesson that's included in the database is one that I created as part of a Carla Institute that I participated in 2 summers ago. And so it was before we did this project, but I thought it fit in well with the scope. So looking at this idea of representation, what it means when we start to see the Marianne with different cultural components and what that can expose about social issues, and what folks from different communities in France are experiencing on a day-to-day basis, and tying it to students' personal experiences here in the US. So, so that's one of the resources for Neneli. And then under her heading here, so the organization, her personal organization is Diallo and Company, and then she does publicity and communications for Les Gouttes d'Or, and we figured out she pretty much runs it. So there's an executive director, and Neneli is definitely driving the train. So Les Gouttes d'Or, so you can dig in and kind of see what that organization is about, and the other members, largely from of African origin. Again, Les Mariannes de la Goutte d'Or. And then this resource could be used in conjunction with the Marianne lesson, so looking at le wax and kind of the proliferation of wax in French fashion design, and who is using le wax in their fashion designs, what is the origin of le wax, kind of looking at all of those complex intersections could be one way to go. And then some resources on La Marianne, which are plentiful, but just a starting place, straight from the government's website, and on who La Marianne is and what she represents.
And can I interrupt you?
Yeah, absolutely.
I just want to check in because, like, I'm not a French teacher, so if there's anything that, and I think that at least the urban studies, is there anything that any language that Jen's using that makes absolutely no sense to you? That you want some clarification on? Good? Okay. Because a lot of that didn't make sense to me when I was there.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, great. Any questions or comments on Neneli's story?
How did you select the people to be interviewed, and how did you get in contact with them?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I've had a professional relationship and friendship for about 12 years with Bilgisa Diallo, who was in the first film. Neneli is her cousin, and so I met Neneli through her. And then I wanted a diversity of perspectives and experiences, especially a diversity of perspectives on identity in particular. And so I asked them to introduce me to 2 other people who would have kind of a different perception on social realities in Paris, because Bilgisa and Neneli grew up in the same neighborhood, They were both born in France, so in a way there's a lot of similarities between their two stories. And so the next two who we'll see have a very different perspective on what it means to be African in Paris.
Can I add something really quick on that? That what I noticed just watching Jen over there too is that she's really friends with all these people that she wanted to interview. So like she already had a pre-existing relationship with them and having met with them beforehand. And so it wasn't like a shot in the dark kind of thing.
They just pretend to like me.
That it clearly wasn't pretend. It was only while the camera was on, but.
At some point, will you talk a little bit about the process of interviewing, how long it took, how much footage you had, all that kind of thing?
Absolutely. I'll let Joanna talk about that maybe after we get through all four of them, if that's okay.
Yeah.
All right, perfect.
Jen, can I ask you
Yeah,
a
of
question
course.
related to the last one of reading?
Yes.
Tiano, I was really interested, especially because the first two films represent the experiences of two women who happen to be cousins, and so therefore share a broader kinship network. How they really accented much more deeply kind of specificities of identity, so not just the fusion of, say, 100% French and 100% African, or 100% French and 100% Guinean, if you will, I think
Yes.
but the pearl, the kind of subnational ethnic and ethno-linguistic identity that attaches to being Pearl. She really put a lot of stress on that, and I'm curious whether in teaching that film you use it to kind of draw out some of those complexities, you know, the kind of kaleidoscopic nature of identity there, which is quite complex and
Yes.
fascinating.
Yeah, so the short answer would be yes, absolutely. I use that as kind of an entry point into the discussion of what does it mean to be Pearl versus Guinean. Like, why would she self-define as Pearl versus Guinean, which Bilgisa did, and you said her, just as you said, her father felt that he was 100% French and 100% African. And so, yeah, so why do the people in the films choose these specific terms for self-identification? I think is really interesting. Also, the way that Bilgisa talked about identity, she has a background as a journalist. And so as she's speaking, you can see her kind of synthesizing all these perspectives. You know, and Nenli speaks very much like from her experience as a professional woman in this organization. So I think the context from which they were speaking was different too and interesting, you know.
Yes.
It speaks to the message.
And you totally correct me because I'm sure there's a ton I missed on it. Nenli is also, when I had conversations with her, she talks from a media perspective, not a journalistic perspective, but from a it's the way she was talking is actually very familiar to me in the sense that like if I'm talking to somebody that's working in self-promotion and advertising and like entertainment, she talked like I recognized her language as kind of melding with that much more than like a journalistic or academic background. But you correct me, so that's just...
No, which definitely makes sense because part of what she was doing in this film was because we asked her to talk about the association because she is the spokesperson for the association. She was assuming that role and you know, fortunately that didn't stop her from digging into her own personal commentary on identity. But yeah, I completely agree with
like, because entertainment is about, you know, appealing to the broad majority and you have to kind of meet, you know, like be accessible in that way. Whereas journalism is much more about critical like thought and expressing a very individualistic point of view.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And it seems also that maybe, although she was trying to make, I think, complex webs of identity accessible, was also speaking in remarkably specific ways.
Yes.
That was what was fascinating. That she wasn't always collapsing or conflating these different valences of her identity into kind of sound bites that people could readily digest and understand. So that was compelling to see. She's crossing national lines too in the African context. And my sons are Pearl, they're Senegalese, but they're Pearl, and suddenly, you know, you have Pearl identity crossing Guinea and Senegal and something much more interesting emerging there. that maybe happens within the French space.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Really neat, yeah. Sorry, I didn't
Excellent.
go on.
No, I'm glad you did, because, that's why we're here. Excellent. Well, let's move into Abdu's story.
C'est quelque chose que j'ai hérité de mon père. Et c'est ce qui consiste dans des voyances, guérison, tout ça. Je suis venu en France, normalement par invitation. Je suis venu faire la guérison, je devais repartir. Et j'avais la chance de rentrer là, que je pouvais encore améliorer peut-être dans d'autres choses et apprendre autre chose. Pas forcément rester sur ce que mon père m'a laissé. Et je suis resté comme ça. Je m'appelle Abdou et j'habite à Paris, en France. Je peux dire que je suis français maintenant. Quand je suis venu en été, moi, mais je suis arrivé, il faisait comme 21h, mais je voyais encore le soleil. Et je voyais personne dehors, comme en Afrique. Et les gens, je demandais où sont les gens. C'est les choses qui m'ont impressionné plus, c'est les changements entre les gens. Et le climat, la neige. Parce que je ne savais pas où dormir. Donc j'ai dormi dans un local où je n'avais pas le droit de dormir. J'ai passé la nuit là-bas avec les rats, les souris. Donc du moment où j'ai passé la nuit avec les rats, les moustiques, les trucs que je me dis, bon, tant que ça ne me tue pas, ça me rend plus fort. Et aujourd'hui, ça a payé, quoi. Aujourd'hui, je suis fier. Pourquoi je suis fier? Parce que je me suis battu et ça a payé. J'ai eu cas de résidence. Je suis français aujourd'hui. La fierté, parce que je me suis battu. J'ai ma fierté d'Africain et d'origine. Ça, on ne peut pas me l'enlever ni retirer. Mais c'est pour dire que voilà, et de là où on vient, on ne peut pas ignorer, mais sur le papier, ça montre que je suis français. Mais pour être régularisé, ça prend beaucoup d'années. Et de savoir, c'est beaucoup de combats. Mais moi, quand même, je l'ai pu obtenir. Même si je reste africain ou je reste sénégalais, mais quand même, j'ai quelque chose. Aussi, la même chose qu'avec ceux qui sont nés. Aujourd'hui, la France aussi m'a beaucoup donné la chance, m'a changé. Pourquoi? J'ai fait formation, je suis auxiliaire en ambulancier. Je n'ai jamais travaillé sur voiture en Afrique. Je ne connais pas la voiture électrique, ça n'a jamais existé, c'est récent. Mais aujourd'hui, je connais beaucoup, j'ai l'expérience sur la voiture électrique. Il faut savoir se défendre aussi. Parce que des fois, ce n'est pas parce qu'on n'est pas né là, on vient de l'Afrique, on n'a pas les droits. Après, c'est l'être humain. L'être humain a le droit de vivre partout dans le monde. Il y a les Français au Sénégal, au Cameroun, en Afrique, partout. Aujourd'hui, je suis en train de pratiquer un sport où je risque d'impressionner le monde parce que je vais faire championnat de France et je vais très loin. Si je suis là, je ne suis pas là par hasard. Bon, après, je suis intégré. Je mange, j'essaie, j'ai 2 cultures et ça me va.
So I asked Abdu if I could tell the story about what happened while we were filming, and he was cool with that. So I didn't know that Abdu was a marabout before we went to film in his apartment. And he told me that he had done some traditional healing, and I was sort of starting to put 2 and 2 together, but that he, and I visited Marabout in Senegal, so I was comfortable with the concept that he's a healer and that he has gifts of clairvoyance, and that these are passed down generationally. And so as we were filming, he was talking about, his marathoning and his journey from Senegal to France, and he said, do you want to learn a little bit more about the other thing that I do, And we were like, yeah. So he took out the tool that he uses that you saw him using, and Joanna's camera shut off. And she was like, oh shoot, I think I'm having a battery issue. Like, got it back on, and then it shut off again. And we're like, does the spirit maybe not want us to film this? Like, should we not? And he was like, no, it's fine. And then the third time it worked. Worked in that we were able to film it. So, like, categorize that under unexpected happenings when you're filming documentaries. But he, of course, has a completely different perspective on his experience in Paris because of where he comes from and the journey he's had. And so I kind of latched on to this idea of journey that is applicable to the lives of a lot of my students as well. So looking at Le Voyage, and he describes arriving in Paris and his impressions, and it was light out, but there was no one around, and it was so different. He was in a completely different cultural context. So I have a lesson that explores that idea and encourages students to explore the idea of journey and how it relates to their personal experience. And then if the internet's my friend, we can click over here.
They'll probably do the same thing at the beginning, just buffering. Can you get the video?
Oh, when I get to the video. Oh, I was going to go into thematic resources, but we'll see if. Yeah, okay. So looking at, I included the marathon site, some information about what a marabout is to kind of prepare students for that concept. And then looking at this process of residency and citizenship and the bureaucratic process that one has to go through to obtain the different levels to be able to stay in France. So some of the resources related to Abdou as well. Abdou, I saw him a couple months ago when I was in Paris, and he has relationships with Senegalese restaurant owners and épicerie, like specialty food shop owners. And so he has offered to take his phone around and like videotape people and talk to people, and I thought that would be a really phenomenal resource to add to the site as well. So watch for that, for Abdou's tour of his neighborhood coming up, which I'm excited to receive. So any discussion you want to have around that? Go.
Something that it's happening in Italy, and so I was wondering if you noticed the same thing happening in France, is some sort of like obviously media harness the conflict between second generation and refugees, actually, and there is this sort of like anti-migration rhetoric on the part of second generation Italian citizens, saying instead of investing, instead of like welcoming here, we should help them home, so in Africa, right? So I was wondering if, obviously this is all mediated by Italian right-wing government, so I was wondering if the same sort of like polarization between refugees and legal immigrants is something that is taking place in France, in Paris, or something that you noticed, or is something just that might be specific to Italy and the context of Italy. So just a curiosity about this between refugees and migrants somehow, if you notice some polarization in this sort.
That specific dynamic I have not personally noticed, and I don't know if there's anyone else in this room who has.
I was reading about in the 70s in France, there was kind of this conservative right-wing shift, and they passed a couple bills. One was called Loi Bonnet, and it was offering second-generation immigrants like 10,000 francs to return back to the country.
Yes.
There were a couple other like quotas that were passed. I know it was pretty prevalent in the 70s.
I haven't noticed the tension between the two communities, meaning legal immigrants, right, and refugees. I
Yeah.
haven't noticed that playing out in a specific way, but certainly kind of this right-wing rhetoric around refugees.
Yeah, exactly. What sort of like more concern is that it's been that sort of like is being interiorized by the ethnic diverse community, right? And not is not only a sort of like a position that is from the white French citizen or the Italian white citizen, but it's something that also someone who's diverse in his or in hers or their background sort of like is seeing this as a sort of like a viable alternative to migration. So this is sort of like what's concerning in the situation.
Yes. The dynamic you described, Lorenzo, calls to mind some remarks, might have been about 20 or more years ago, made by Tahar Ben-Jaloun, a Moroccan writer, based in Moroccan origin writer, long based in France, who declared that he was not an immigré, not an immigrant. And by immigrant, he clearly understood those who typically came with from maybe less elite backgrounds, with less education, less wealth, who were not part of this professional, educated middle to upper middle class stratum. That perhaps some of that, for instance, he said the Anos family, that stratum that her background represents. And Ben-Jaloun worked so heavily with those who were in the position, we could say, of the subaltern, immigrant, and refugee. So he was deeply sympathetic, and yet wanted to distance himself, so consciously from that label and that image. Something I've always found very troubling, and others have found troubling. So that I think there can be something of that dynamic, but I don't know how widespread it is. So just an observation.
One of the things I noticed is, I think, and it's not anything new, is like between the woman who were born in Paris and between Amadou, is he was grateful for being there, where they were more like trying to assert their identity and more like, okay, we were born here, so we shouldn't have to prove that we're French. We shouldn't, and I think it's a very common thing. I mean, I was very grateful when I came here, and to have a job and to be accepted and things like that. So, I think in France, and especially in Paris, the second generation is a little bit different than it is here. So.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and I think that there's a distinction to be made between, speaking really, really generally, the Maghreb community in Paris and the sub-Saharan African community in Paris. I mean, just to speak in like really, really general terms about identity and kind of how the different colonial histories played a role in that identity formation. So yeah, absolutely something that could underpin how you decide to integrate these films into courses. That would be a really interesting approach. Great.
When you say Paris, are you talking about Paris proper or the banlieues also?
So all of these folks, well, Lucy technically lives in a banlieue, but not a banlieue where there's been a large immigrant population. But the rest all live in Paris proper. Yeah.
The banlieue experience is very different, in my opinion.
Yes.
Very different.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Was there special attention paid to the country of origin where they're coming from? I mean, did you select different regions in Africa, or are they primarily like ex-colonies of France, or did it not really matter?
Yeah, so I think I have an attachment to Senegal, and so I definitely wanted a person of Senegalese origin in one of the films, and so Abdou was that person. Again, the other two I had personal relationships with, and so I knew more about their background and story, and I knew that they would be able to provide a lot of rich content, especially for classroom use. And then Lucy, coming from, and she'll talk about this in the film, but coming from the Rwandan genocide context, she was a journalist during the genocide. I thought that would provide a completely different perspective. And so yes, I was trying to get different perspectives. Because of time and funding limitations, we were only able to do 4 people, but I keep kind of dreaming about how we could continue this project. And yes, I would absolutely try to get more geographic regions representing, meaning regions where people are from, or looking at this idea of ethnic groups too, like continuing the pull discussion, I think could be really.
Be cool to get different age groups as well.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
And if you were able to get a banlieue perspective in addition to the perspective of those who have become more or less comfortably ensconced within the city limits, that would be fascinating.
So you can document this when you write the next grant. You can say, evidence shows.
Right.
That people are asking for this.
Give the people what they want. I'm just assuming Joanna's on board for the continuation. So. All right. Let's listen to Lucy's story.
C'est vrai qu'on fuit l'absence de liberté d'expression, mais on arrive dans une autre prison. En fait, c'est un changement d'identité. Je m'appelle Lucie Mukundwa, j'habite en Picardie et je travaille à Paris. Je viens du Rwanda et j'ai quitté le Rwanda en 2006 pour venir en exil. Moi, je m'identifie en tant que citoyenne du monde parce que de ma nature, je ne me suis jamais sentie appartenir à une communauté ou à un pays. Mais c'est vrai que j'ai plus d'affinité de la région dans laquelle je viens. Et, parce que, à cause de son histoire, c'est plus une question d'humanité. À ce moment, je suis en train de créer une entreprise. C'est une galerie en ligne qui vend des œuvres d'art et de l'artisanat artistique des pays membres de la région de l'Afrique de l'Est, c'est-à-dire du Rwanda, du Burundi, du Kenya, de l'Ouganda, de la Tanzanie et du Soudan du Sud. Quand je suis arrivée, c'était toute ma première fois de venir en France. Committee to Protect the Journalists, une ONG américaine, m'avait accordé une bourse d'études. C'est vrai que j'ai choisi la France aussi parce que, grâce à l'histoire de la France, parce que je savais très bien qu'ils ont été les premiers à faire une déclaration de droits de l'homme au niveau mondial. Quand on est encore en Afrique et qu'on ne connaît pas les réalités, on se dit, oui, bon, si j'ai la chance d'arriver en France, il n'y aura plus d'injustice que j'ai subie à partir de l'Afrique. Je vais avoir maintenant bénéficié des droits comme que je ne bénéficiais pas avant en Afrique. Mais du coup, quand vous arrivez, vous êtes confronté à des situations auxquelles vous ne vous attendez pas, des fois liées au racisme, marginalisation des peuples, des gens qui viennent demander l'asile politique. Parce qu'on est considéré comme souvent des gens qui fuient la misère, alors que dans mon cas, par exemple, moi j'avais un travail, je gagnais beaucoup mieux ma vie qu'aujourd'hui. J'étais coordinatrice d'une radio américaine, une voix de l'Amérique à partir de Kigali. Et quand vous arrivez et que tout le monde vous considère justement comme étant quelqu'un qui vient de bénéficier des aides parce qu'on fuit la misère, vous êtes... En fait, c'est une situation à laquelle, par exemple, moi-même, je ne m'attendais pas, par exemple. En fait, en Afrique, on se sent chez soi. Et c'est-à-dire, en fait, vous avez une famille et puis vous n'avez pas ces problèmes que vous rencontrez quand vous êtes réfugié. C'est-à-dire, par exemple, quand je voyageais avec mon passeport rwandais, je n'ai jamais eu, par exemple, des problèmes pour le visa. C'était facile d'obtenir un visa parce que j'avais un pays... mais aujourd'hui, dans mon cas, je suis réfugiée quand je dois, par exemple, aller à Londres ou il me faut, quand je dois demander un visa, même si c'est pour le travail, il me demande beaucoup de documents. Mais mon statut aujourd'hui ne me permet pas de circuler librement comme je le faisais avant. En fait, c'est un changement qui n'est pas seulement lié à un changement social, mais aussi économique, mais aussi son manque de liberté qu'on avait avant. Du coup, après, on se dit, finalement, il n'y a pas un endroit où on peut fuir toutes ces violences, d'injustice, si nous n'avons pas les mêmes chances que les autres. Créons notre chance. J'aimerais bien que la future génération arrive à comprendre aussi l'autre qui vient de l'étranger, à le considérer comme un être humain et qui vient lui apporter quelque chose et qui ne vient pas pour dépendre de lui. Il faut aussi qu'ils comprennent que nous aussi, quand nous arrivons ici, on leur apporte aussi notre expérience, on leur apporte aussi notre intelligence. Moi, mon espoir, en fait, c'est que la future génération arrive à partager les richesses équitablement. Qu'il n'y ait pas les gens qui bénéficient des richesses et le reste rester dans la pauvreté. Raison pour laquelle moi j'ai créé cette entreprise, c'est-à-dire en fait, je fais la promotion des créations artistiques de ma région d'origine en Afrique. Et je fais la promotion en Europe pour qu'ils puissent acheter plus, que ce soit un peu très joli. Mon rêve, c'est de pouvoir ouvrir plusieurs boutiques en Europe et dans le monde entier qui vendent des objets qui sont fabriqués en Afrique pour qu'aussi les gens de l'Afrique puissent bénéficier des richesses du monde.
To self-identify as a citizen of the world, which I found to be so interesting and speaks to her background and what she went through as a journalist during the genocide. To not identify with a particular ethnic group or with a particular nationality was certainly a conscious choice and speaks to that trauma. She is an incredibly well-connected person. She entered into political exile in France, forgetting how long ago now. What did she say?
2006.
2006. Okay, so 12 years ago. And then right after we interviewed her, she was like, I'm going to this gathering. It's an organization that I'm a part of that supports refugees and their economic development. We were like, yeah, that sounds great. We'd love to get some more context. And she's like, the former president's going to be there. And we're like, that's great. We would love to meet the former president of this organization. No, she met François Hollande. So we're like in this gathering, and I was literally in cut-off jeans meeting François Hollande, not prepared to meet the former president of France. So all this to say, she's a very well-connected individual who has absolutely, when she makes that point about bringing her intelligence and her skill set to France and really contributing to France in a positive way, she has lived that. So I know we are almost at time, and so I just wanted to point at a few thematic resources, specifically La Déclaration des droits de l'homme et du citoyen, because she brings that up as the reason why she chose France. So doing a lesson around that I think would be really interesting. I'm working on one right now. If you end up doing one, I would love to hear how it goes because I'm still trying to figure out how I'm going to present that and tie it into her story. And I just wanted to share quickly this resource sharing page. And so the way I have it set up is you can just create a post and it posts right to this Padlet that's then linked into the resource site. To let us know how you've used these films in your courses. If you prefer to email me, my contact information is there too, and I hope that we can keep the discussion going. I know that there was a question about process, and so I wanted to leave a little bit of time for you to answer that question before we shut it down.
I do want to say that if you, because we obviously aren't going to, there's more to be covered, but if you are trying to figure out how to use media and stuff like that, and there's lots of ways that I think you can use it without it having to be a polished like sort of professional piece. I'm happy to like answer any questions you might have or connect you with people. My card is up there, with my email address on there and my phone number. Feel free to reach out. The process question, specifically, what part of the process are you?
Just kind of like how long it took, how many questions you had, what you edited out.
Oh yeah, so I'm going to do a kind of a skim coat of that. But it was a lot of, so from the beginning, it's saying, okay, what is the content you want to focus on with Jen, and then working with her on like getting a sense of the questions and organizing. So I helped her to organize those in a way, because I have a really specific process that I organize questions in when I interview people for documentaries. And so like trying to coach her a little bit on that piece so that when she comes into the interview, because I'm not going to know what's being said, I can't, and so that she has some background about like just ordering it in a more effective way. And then what to listen to, because it's edited for visual content rather than something that's going to be written up later. So I need things to be said in a certain way so that they can be usable chunks in the video. And then to the piece about the translation, it's like I'm trying to think, like each of those interviews was probably an hour. And then, so it was like I hadn't done closed captioning on my footage before, so I was like, all right, let's figure this out. And so like it was, there were some things with that I had to go through on a technical like point, and then Jen had to sit down and watch them all and write out, just rough, right into the like I gave her my laptop and like, write it in here over the weekend, and then
before weekend.
And then I got it back, and then I could edit it like I would normally edit footage. I just had to see the written pieces to understand. And then there was a lot of like having her come over. We sit down at my workstation and say, okay, like I had to, she had to like I'm like, people say a lot of ums and uhs, and French, I don't know that, so I have to be like, am I cutting off a word, or am I just cutting off a piece of audio that shouldn't be there? So a lot of that. So I think it was a kind of a tedious process in that way, but it's great because also from the searchability of stuff, it's like you have all the text, and for videos to become searchable. Like if you can put the text in, online, it helps so people can find it on the topics in there. We kept these, I was advising her to keep these to this time frame because of wanting, like I'm used to thinking about the usability of social media. And so people can like digest this without, so it can reach audiences that aren't just French specific audiences. Because when you have a specific audience, maybe this is a given for everybody in here, you have more patience for watching your kids and your grandkids than somebody else does. And so like wanting it to be accessible for people that aren't used to the content. And so just sort of thinking through that, and then thematically thinking through, okay, there's 4. So there were some production approaches that we took that were about like how can these all visually seem like they fit together. And then just responding. Is it Abdu? Was like, he was a total maybe. Like, he used to, we did not know until like probably 30 minutes before we were at his place that we were actually going to get the interview with him. And just so responding in that way. And I don't know, it was fun. It's a different production process. But like Jen's really adaptive, and I teach media education, so like it's really easy for me to like outline break it down, like what are the things that we're gonna need, and like what paint, and then hearing enough like during the interview, like I had to do a short check-in with her, like what did he talk about, because I need to find some footage that represents what he talked about. And so like just being able to stay in communication, like, hey, you just tell me, but not too much, because she also is socializing with everybody, right? So like, and there's a relational piece that like she's gonna spend a couple hours. We're all gonna spend a couple hours afterwards with the people we just interviewed, and not wanting to interrupt that, but at the same time have some time to say what happened, so that I can get some shots that represent what happens.
Yeah, and capturing that effective B-roll too,
Yeah,
right?
that's what it's called, B-roll.
Yeah, now I'm gonna watch for B-roll and everything, because you spent so much time thinking through and you'd be like, okay, just a second, we'd be cruising ahead, and you're like back there down on the ground in the metro station, and so the thought that went into that, that was a learning experience for me, how much.
And for people that like are in the media world, like they would not say this was like amazing B-roll. I mean, too, like, so it's really trying to respond to the situation. I mean, like, it's what I'm saying is like, it's just so responsive, and so you're trying to merge this world of like, when you have this production, you're used to a very specific way that you do production, and then merging it to being relationally responsive, it's different,
There was a question, what is B-roll?
What is B-roll?
Oh, yeah, so it's fast. It's an old term. There's A camera, B camera. A camera gets the interview, and the B camera gets all the footage that supports. So anything that's not the critical content. So it's all the visuals that help to support the story.
The pigeon was critical content.
It was. I clearly had to reuse it. Like, I hope everybody wasn't like, again with the pigeon in the opening.
And then Jen, did you do a transcription in French as well?
No.
No.
Yeah, and really I cheated. I only did like a really rough translation for Joanna on the components that I wanted to use. And then we used a highlighter system. I don't know if you remember this. You might have
like
blocked
the
it
old
out.
school, like actually a highlighter.
Yeah, and I was like, okay, blue has to do with identity, and pink has to do with representation, so that we could kind of like thematically chunk material too. So yeah, I want to be respectful of your time, and I hope this was useful for you. There's some print resources up here that I would be happy to talk about for anyone who wants to stay and discuss that. But really, thank you just so much for your time and your reception and curiosity today.
Thank you